From the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Bernard Show. We've got another wonderful guest joining us today. We are going to be speaking with Dr. Alexandra Chauran in just a few moments, and we are going to be talking about her new book, Getting Through It, and it's all about reclaiming, rebuilding your life after trauma, adversity, change, and I felt this is a really important topic for us to be talking about, especially with the tumultuous times that we seem to be living in. So I thought it would be great for us to talk about that. But before that, I just wanted to let you know some things that we are going to be taking a week off next week, I believe. Let me double check that calendar again before I actually say that for sure. I hope you've all had a wonderful week. We are looking at the end of Mercury retrograde coming up, so that should be nice for some of you. I've been very lucky to have not been affected in any way by that this time around. It seems that I've been skating by the skin of my teeth these last few times, so I'm grateful. Whatever work that I'm doing, I'm going to keep doing it because it seems to be working for me. Anyway, as you know, I was also on a new web show last week, and I hope you guys were able to catch that. We were talking about shamanic soul retrieval, so make sure to check out either my Facebook page or my Patreon page if you would like to see that particular show. So again, I want to say hello to all of you that are just joining us. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Dr. Alexandra Chauran is a second-generational fortune teller, a high priestess of British traditional Wicca. She's a queen of coven. As a professional psychic intuitive for over a decade, she serves psychic apprentices and thousands of clients. She has received a master's in teaching from Seattle University, a doctorate from Valdosta State University, and a certified in Tarot. And many of you might already know her from all of her wonderful books that she's published with one of my favorite publishers, Llewellyn Publishing House. So welcome to the show, Dr. Chauran. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are really happy to have you here. I'm really honored to have you here. So thank you again from the bottom of my heart. I really look forward to covering some important topics today, and that being the idea of overcoming adversity, trauma. With so much going on in the world, I wonder what led you to be inspired to write this book, and why is it so important for us now?
Well, it seems like excellent timing kind of for a bad situation in the world, but I actually wrote this book. I started writing it in 2017. It took me a couple of years to write. The publishing cogs move slowly. I actually wrote it after some of my own traumas. I had kind of a country song of a few years. I was in a major car accident, and then I got stage 3C cancer, and I had to have chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, the whole works, mastectomies for my breasts, and got rid of my ovaries. And then my ex-husband left me. I even lost the dog. It was very country song, a few years for me. So I went through a lot of trauma in a very short period of time. Prior to that, I'd led a pretty blessed life. So my editor from Llewellyn, it's a wonderful company. She said, wow, you've been getting through this really well. She's also my friend. And she said, we would love it if you would write a book about getting through trauma with positivity. And when I first wrote it, I was trying to make it like a 365-day devotional type of thing. And I found that it kind of expanded and spiraled because people move through grief and trauma in so many different directions in so many different ways. So it turned into more of a workbook that you can go through at your own pace or go back and forth with it. And then 2020 happened, and so many people are suffering huge losses, like a job loss, relationship loss, the loss of a family member to COVID. All of these losses compound. And I thought, wow, this is blessed timing. And I'm really hoping that this book is the most important one I've ever written. So this is the first time I'm actually trying to promote one of my books.
Oh, wow.
Because I think it could help. It could really help people. I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, and I believe it will. I haven't had a chance to read everything, but everything that I have looked through, I mean, just your approach is, it's like you said, it's casual. It's not a very stern way of this is what's going to happen and that's what's going to happen. It's kind of like what could happen and this could be happening to you. So maybe let's start off with talking about the common thing that everybody talks about, the stages of grief. Is it fair to say that you went through them, and are you incorporating that into some of the way that the book is presented?
So I used the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Actually, in modern day psychological science, we don't really adhere to the Kubler-Ross stages of grief anymore. They've been proven to be pretty incorrect, and anybody intuitively knows this when they go through a serious grief. However, these stages of grief are really pervasive in our
like
culture.
You said,
we know
casual,
about denial,
it's not
and depression,
a very
anger, and finally
stern way of this
acceptance.
is what's going to happen. And that's
I found that when I was going through cancer treatment, I was sort of being pressured by external forces in our culture to kind of get over it, snap out of it, right? And I think that that is a really common experience for people suffering losses, especially compounding multiple losses, is this idea that our capitalist culture wants us to shake ourselves off and move forward immediately. But what direction is forward, right? So I used these stages of grief as a foundation of emotions for people to allow themselves to feel their feelings and to move in any direction they need to through those stages of grief, because sometimes it can feel like one step forward, two steps back.
And it's true. I think it's fair to say that those who I know who have gone through loss over this last year, I mean, they could be feeling any one of those stages of grief just throughout the day alone, and just switching from one mood swing to another, for lack of a better term. And everyone's always seems to be searching for, when is this going to be over? When is this going to be over? What do you say to people that are asking that question? So I just want this to be over is what I hear a lot.
Oh, I hear that too. I remember just wishing I could go to sleep and like wake up a few years later, but it's not like that. It's one of those situations where the process, the journey is the destination. And so you really have to try to let go of that feeling of wanting it to be back to the way things were before, because things might never be back to the way things were before, right? So we can't really think of it as moving through something like the only way out is through. Instead, it has to be sort of process oriented so that we can find ourselves where we always were, which is right here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as I can't help, again, another observation, and actually it's something that you wrote about in your book, which I love. I have a dear friend who's going through an upheaval. My best friend is going through an upheaval in their life. And that sense of guilty for being, through living through an upheaval, that sense that they're a burden to another person, and always apologizing for being sad or going through life's drama. They're like, I don't want to be your source of drama. Well, life happens, and that's okay. But that sense of burden, what do you say to people that feel that way?
Oh, that's huge. If you're going through big, major transitions in life, you're going to lose some roles in your life. And that's really what that is. It's loss of roles. Like I felt like I was losing my role as a wife. It was ripped away from me by this impending divorce. And, then I had to share my kids suddenly, and I felt like I was only a part-time mother. And the loss of those roles, combined with the loss of symbols of womanhood, like my breasts and ovaries, I started feeling like this big burden on the world, and everybody was like hot potato. But the fact is, all of these pieces of survivorship form what we call survivor's guilt. And oftentimes people will experience that when they see somebody that they feel is better or more equipped to deal with these situations having a worse time. And so comparison is a thief of joy. I think that one way that we can kind of find our way through these feelings of survivor guilt and burdening others is by stopping those comparisons and really finding the connection and the companionship in those relationships where we add value just by being worthy. We were worthy the day we were born, and we still are.
Absolutely. And it's again, it just breaks my heart when I hear people saying, I'm so sorry, I just went through something. You're not the one that needs to apologize,
Yeah.
And I think that perhaps, I don't want to say taking ownership, but maybe aligning with that temporary identity of I am a person who's grieving and going through something right now is perhaps a little bit more empowering than making believe that everything's okay to the outside of the world.
I think also these feelings come up a lot for people who are helper personalities. So in normal life, those people are always helping others. And suddenly when something happens to them that cuts off their ability to give to the community, they feel like a giant leech all of a sudden, right? And so what we need to realize is that these periods of rest and relaxation, these relationships are not transactional. It's okay if we can't give everything back right now. Right now might be our time to receive the love that we've radiated out into the community.
Now, you talk about in the beginning of the book, and actually we talked about the stages of grief, and one of them being denial. Like you said, that it's very pervasive throughout our modern Western culture that, everything's okay. And how helpful is it? Well, perhaps maybe let me frame my question like this. How would it be helpful for someone to identify that they are going through an upheaval? Some people might think of losing their home as, oh, that's fine, or losing a job, oh, that's fine, or being stuck at home because of a pandemic, oh, well, we have to do this. While at the same time denying their inner conflict that they're feeling over these external, things that are being thrust upon them. How do we identify that we're going through an upheaval, I guess is my question.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is what I mentioned earlier, that grief is cumulative. So when you suffer multiple grief situations in 1 year or less, it can be much more powerful in your life than if you had experienced those losses over a few years in succession. So, for example, I was a poster child cancer patient and I always had a smile on my face, but then the divorce was what broke me, and I feel like it was these cumulative losses. And 2020 and the pandemic are definitely creating those cumulative losses for many people. You're losing a job, you're losing the home that you used to live in. These things add up. And I think one way for you to identify that, you can actually take grief quizzes online where they'll ask you about these losses, because sometimes you don't realize, oh my gosh, yes, and I also changed my career. Oh yeah, that's right. I also, lost a pet. You don't think of these things. Another alarm bell is what I mentioned before, which is the feeling that you want things to go back to normal. That feeling is kind of a red flag that tells you, okay, I've suffered some losses and I need to really process those because, things might not go back to normal.
Absolutely. You just brought up something for me that I noticed as well. Many of us, myself included, in past situations of adversity and grief, that we compare, and you actually brought it up earlier, but the fact that we use comparison a lot. That, well, my situation isn't as bad as that person's, or their situation's not as bad as mine, and I always use this analogy that there's an old, I believe it's an old Jewish folk story, that the village was complaining that they had the worst life and they had the worst things, and I guess the village elder asked everyone to come to the center square and throw all of their grief into a pile in the middle of a circle. And he said, okay, well, now you get to choose whatever grief that you want to pick up. You know, you can exchange grief, and everybody picked up their own and took their own back. So it's like we're all going through something basically. But again, that idea of, well, my situation's not as bad as theirs. I don't need to worry about it. What can we do about that?
I'd like to answer your story with another story,
Okay,
if I
yeah.
may.
Yes.
A Buddhist story. And this story is about a farmer. And one day his horses ran away. And his neighbors said, "Oh, such bad luck." But then the next day, his horses came back and they brought with him a new horse. And his neighbors said, "Such good luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe," just as he had said the day before. And then his son tried to break one of the horses and broke his leg. And his neighbor said, "Such bad luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." And then the next day, the officials came to town looking for people to go fight in the war. And his son got to stay behind because of his broken leg. And the neighbors said, "Such good luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." And the idea is that good luck and bad luck are all mixed up. And we're really never going to know how it all settles out until we're long gone and dead. So it really makes no sense to compare, even though it's a human nature. But we need to continuously address and confront that and understand that we are just part of this beautiful nature, which is variance.
Absolutely. And that we're bringing up these spiritual stories, and that brings me to my next question about spirituality and how that plays in all this. Now, we have those of us that are so immersed in this idea of, you know, the universe is unfolding exactly as it should, and are in denial of their emotion, or are in denial that they're sad, or in denial that they're depressed because this is the way the universe is unfolding. And then there are those who may jump to spirituality to find some sense of an anchor. We always what do we used to call them? The jailhouse born agains. That kind of desperation. And I've done it myself. I pray to the goddess more often when I'm stressed out than when I'm happy. That's the reality of it. So where does spirituality play? Where does it land in all of this? And how can we utilize it as a tool and not necessarily a crutch? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I sprinkled spirituality all through my book, but I wanted to keep it pretty accessible to people of different faith traditions too. I think that, like you mentioned, there can be a sort of toxic level of spirituality when it imposes additional burdens upon us. One example in our sort of magical communities is toxic positivity. This idea that can sort of, we want to think positive. We want power of the law of attraction on our side. But that can also be a problem when we start to sort of blame ourselves or blame another person and say, "Oh, that person just wasn't positive enough," or "Maybe I'm just not thinking positively enough to get through this." And that's where it becomes a liability more than a crutch. And so I think that, spirituality can be very, very empowering, but you also have to realize how durable and resilient your spirit is and your divine powers are. If you're mad at your God or gods, yell at them. They can take it. If you're not feeling positive, it's okay to say, "Hey, right now this sucks." And so you have to temper it with your humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always say a lot of people say we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and we can't be in denial of our humanness, no matter whether it's bad, good, or in between. It's life. So we chose here, we always say we chose to incarnate at this time to go through these experiences. And again, speaking of that toxic spirituality, you mentioned something about people like saying, well, they're being negative, and that's why that happened. That idea that, "Oh, well, this is my karma." And a lot of people, I believe that a lot of people have the definition of karma wrong. I went through that discussion with a good friend of mine who's going through something, saying, "Well, what did I do to deserve this? Is this my karma?" And what would you say to someone that was thinking that it's their karma that brought this upheaval?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I wrote another book called Have You Been Hexed, which is about all of this, because a lot of times we notice patterns in our life and we can assume there could be a curse upon us, like, oh my gosh, why is this all happening to me? And I think that there's a lot of pieces to this, but the main take home message is your mind is powerful. And if you start to believe that you're cursed, start to believe that you have some kind of karmic burden, then you will create that in your life. And so it's really important to address those beliefs and work with them, because if you just insist that this is your task in life to bear this burden, then you will create it and you will bear it accordingly.
Absolutely. That's so true. So at the end of the book, you did put some wonderful exercises, and I love the one I think I mentioned to you right before the show started. The "Oh no, not again." That just the title alone was perfect for me, because even I have that idea of, oh God, here we go again, and you actually utilize one of the runes as a sigil to help people with this as a tool. Can you tell us, first of all, what is "Oh no, not again"?
Well, the "Oh no, not again" piece is kind of a trauma response. I think that everyone who's been through trauma understands this, especially like relationship trauma. If you've ever been through a rough relationship, you get into a new relationship and a trigger happens that makes you think about the abusive relationship or whatever, and you think, oh no, not again, even though the same pattern is not happening, right? So you have to kind of stop that and figure out what's happening in the moment. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about the rune that you talked about, because I also wrote a book called Runes for Beginners. So I'm definitely into rune work. It's really great. So I have a copy of my book right here. And let's see if I can show it. This is a bind rune. And what a bind rune is it's a combination of two or more runes. And so the way that you do rune work is by drawing the rune and painting the rune. And this particular one, I think, would appeal to your audience. I think we've got a lot of witchy girlfriends and guy friends out there. And this one harkens back to the Gwen Thompson's poem, The Wiccan Reed, where she says, when misfortune is enow, wear the blue star on thy brow. And that part of the read might be a question, what blue star, what brow, huh? And so I have a working that you can do that's a magical spiritual working where you can create this bind rune for yourself and use its power to connect you with your feelings and bring you through the experience. And in this way, you can sort of connect with others who are doing the same thing, shared experiences, and can bring power to the ritual.
I love that. And I think that I feel that those of us who do practice any form of the craft, that's another tool that we can use. And I feel that we forget about that sometimes. We get so caught up in our grief. It's like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. Why don't I utilize some of the tools I've learned? And so I love how you incorporated that into all of this.
You were mentioning earlier about how you pray to the goddess more when you're sad than when you're happy. And I find the opposite's true to me. When I'm happy, I'm full of prayer. Then if I'm emotionally upset, I forget that I can run home to my spirituality, and so I have to remind myself, oh, right, I always feel better after I pray. I should probably do that.
Right. It's so true. Absolutely. Now, so once we are moving through the process of grief, let us say, how does someone feel or know that they've come out the other end? We talked about coming out the other end, and I wish, I could wake up 2 years from now. When do we acknowledge that it's behind us, or at least, one of the things I tell my friends when they're going through something, I'm like, they're like, when does this pain go away? Maybe this is a better way to phrase it. When does the pain go away?
Yeah.
And the only thing I can say is through my own experience that it doesn't necessarily go away, but we learn from it and we learn to live with it. And only time seems to help with that. But for those of us that are thinking that we're still in it, there's many times where people begin to identify with the grief and then become a victim of the grief, perhaps is a way of saying it, that it becomes a part of their identity that they don't want to let go of. When do we know that we're through it? And when do we know that we've just like, we're addicted to grief?
That's a really good point. Yeah. First, I want to acknowledge that there's no wrong way to grieve, but I understand and I recognize the idea that sometimes it can become a part of your identity. So it can be very difficult to understand when you're wallowing in the grief and when you're feeling your feelings. So again, I want to encourage people to, we want to move to acceptance. We want to move to finding our new normal. And to do that, we're going to have to feel our feelings. But the difference is we are processing our feelings. That's why I try and give a lot of activities and exercises in my book, because it's not about wallowing. It's not about recalling the memories and chewing them over and over and over again in your head and saying, oh my God, I was so stupid or whatever. It's not about rumination. It's about processing and chugging through these feelings so that you can really come out the other side. And what the other side looks like is a new normal. And like you said, grief can spring back up unbidden many years from the experience. And that's what we call trauma. And that's something that we may need to address ongoing as we move forward through our lives for the rest of our lives. Mental illness isn't something you can just turn off. And some trauma can get to the point of being clinical mental illness. So we might need to work, with therapists, with counselors, and with ourselves and our spiritual guides.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my next question. The idea that, hey, it's okay to ask for help, professional help, but does it make you any less spiritual and does it make you any less strong? Actually, I think it makes people stronger when they actually realize that, I can't do this alone. Some people can't do it.
Yep. And your therapist isn't going to do it for you either. You're going to need to put in the work, and that is a source of strength.
Hear, hear. Absolutely. So we're running out of time, and I'm wondering if I like to ask this question of some of my guests, and this seems to be a good topic I'd like to ask, that if you knew the entire world was listening right now, especially with what's going on in the world, dealing with the idea of overcoming adversity, what would be your advice to the world right now? You can take a minute.
I know this is big. I think I want to start with, you are loved and you were amazing the day that you were born, and you still are. That's really what I'd love to impart to the world.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. So let's tell them a little bit about where they can find the book. It's Getting Through It. I love the title, Getting Through It. Reclaim and Rebuild Your Life After Adversity, Change, or Trauma. It's being published by Llewellyn. Is it out already?
Yes, it is out. It released December 8th, so it's available wherever books are sold. But please patronize your small bookstores if you can. They are hurting during this crisis.
Absolutely. And where can they find more about you besides Amazon and Llewellyn? Do you have a website, or I know you do a Twitch, which is kind of cool.
I was about to say, I would love it if people would come to my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Queen of Diamonds. It is my major social outlet right now. I'm an extrovert. I'm a Gemini, and we're in a pandemic. So I would love to chat with you all there. Twitch.tv/Queen of Diamonds.
That's perfect and wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for joining us. And well, guys, I guess I didn't have a chance to pull up my calendar during this interesting conversation. So please keep an eye out on my social media sites to see what's going on next week, because I forgot to look, and I apologize for that. We've got so many great shows lined up over the next several months. I know I'm taking a day off somewhere in the next month, but I don't know when. Anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra Chauran. I look forward to having you back, because you have such an incredible back catalog of information. And, well, my goodness, it's been so great to have you here. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to everybody, I love you. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.